Because, there were many things that
Yeah, the girls are fighting.
we knew would happen. Many things. I'm not here, so I told you so.
Oh, God, I don't like her at all. I can't stand her. I'm not here to say I told you so. Ha, 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 ha. The country's on fire because of your inability to fucking read the goddamn room. Because you wanted to literally do Scissor Sisters with Liz Cheney parading a war criminal's reactionary daughter around. Okay, get the out of here. Oh my God. Oh my God. I can't stand these monstrous scumbags, dude. It's crazy. Like, they loved the death and destruction that Israel put on top of the Palestinian people, no matter how unpopular it was, across the political spectrum. They were like, nah, we love genocide. Sorry, we like it more than we like defending. We like defending the future of American democracy. You know, how could this have happened? We couldn't Brett Summer our way out of this. It's crazy.
Former Vice President Kamala Harris.
Oh, Colonel Putty, thank you for the 10 gifted subs.
Back with a little I told you so this week, as President Trump's tariffs are setting off global shockwaves. So what does Harris's former running mate think? Well,
she's the front runner for 48% for 2028. Yeah, I think the Democrats are cooked, honestly. They really are. They don't learn. They don't understand. They will never understand. I will not lose hope. I will continue to try to actively educate liberals who have this kind of idiotic assessment and think that, like, Kamala Harris was a perfect vessel and the people failed her and that she didn't fail the American people. People say you got to break away and create a third party, but what you don't understand is this is where the motion is. This low-key kind of means that the liberals are a little bit off base as well. This means that the liberals themselves, at least right now, do not have an appetite for a third party vote, let alone even a more progressive figure, dude. We have to re-examine the way we look at, like, the Democratic Party's base of support. This is terrifying. Yeah, also here, if the presidential election, according to Overton Insights, if the presidential election were held again today, who would you vote for? Trump 48 against Harris 45. Oh, it hurts. 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 It hurts so much, dude.
Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota has been on a national town hall tour through red.
Yeah, Tim's demonstrating a little bit of misogynoir for saying that small being Kamala Harris should take ownership over her mistakes.
Congressional districts from Iowa to Texas to Ohio, and he joins us now from Columbus. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. You're the governor of an agriculture-heavy state, one of the top 5 in the country, I believe. What's your reaction to what you just heard from the agriculture secretary?
Yeah, good morning, Jake. Well, I'm stunned. Your questions were spot on. It's very clear that she talked about the people she's listening to. That is not the agricultural community. It is certainly not producers. It's not folks like Cargill, CHS, General Mills, who are out in my district. Look, this is a really precarious time, and the flippant nature that we're just trying something new here is really dangerous. These markets took us years to develop, and we have to be dependable trading partners. They don't come back overnight. And everyone knows in the history of trade wars, agriculture gets hit the hardest. So I'm deeply concerned.
So let me ask you, because another group you're in touch with, the United Auto Workers Union, you have a lot of that. They have supported you for years and years and years. They were excited to have you on the Democratic ticket. President Trump argues that these tariffs are needed to bring American manufacturing back and to help American workers left behind in places like Minnesota. He has support from the UAW. The UAW called his auto tariffs, quote, a long overdue shift away from a harmful economic framework that has devastated the working class. It signals a return to policies that prioritize the workers who build this country rather than the greed of ruthless corporations, unquote. I have to say, that sounds a lot like language you would use. What do you say to the UAW?
Yes, it is what I would use. And here's the thing that the Democrats have to figure out. Donald Trump's language around this, he's not wrong that we've had manufacturing gutted. He's not wrong that we saw an outshoring. People of my generation were told, you know, there aren't going to be any manufacturing jobs, so you need to go to college and rack up student loan debt. The problem is Donald Trump's solution to this is not the solution. Now, UAW is right. Certain tariffs, if they're on to steel or if they're targeted correctly, do make a difference. That's not what we're dealing with here. So just
Thank God, dude. Someone is fucking messaging this appropriately. Holy shit. It's not meh. He's right. He's right. Democrats should not be in favor of free trade. Democrats should be the first to acknowledge that free trade is what has gutted the American manufacturing capabilities, destroyed the American labor force, destroyed the countryside. He's a good messenger on this. Bad take? Why is that a bad take? Free trade is nice. Without free trade, or with free trade, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no labor force. Without the labor force, you have no labor power. Without labor power, you have no labor unions. Without labor unions, you have no way to increase wages. Without increasing your wages, you arrive at what America is doing currently, which is 23% underemployment, gig economy jobs galore, no protections whatsoever, no mechanism of pushback against the one party that's supposed to be against the right-wing reactionary forces, and you arrive at a nation with no health care, with no future, no retirement funds, a nation in disarray. All of it ties back to labor at the end of the day. Free trade is nice if you are not in the U.S., though. No, it's not. That's also incorrect. What are you talking about? Free trade is not nice. Do you believe the WTO narrative that free trade is actually greatly improved the living standards of all these other countries? No, obviously it has not. That is not the case at all. The one country that has actually been able to dramatically improve itself in that process is China. And that is not because of the free trade. That is because of what they did with the foreign capital that came in. The only thing that free trade benefits is capital owners. That's why America did it for so many years. A lot of people say, we don't want free trade, we want fair trade. You can't have fair trade without dramatically improving the material circumstances of the global South. There's no wage parity. There is a gap for benefits. There's a gap for living standards. This also exists within the United States. In the United States, I'll tell you something, okay? I'll put you on game a little bit. In the United States, there's a concept called low-cost zones. Places like Oklahoma, states like Oklahoma are considered low-cost zones. And companies try to move to these low-cost zones. Why do they do that? Why is it considered a low-cost zone? Because less regulation around labor rights and also cheaper cost of living in general. It ultimately fails, though, because there is no initiative to improve these opportunity zones or these low-cost zones. So people don't want to live there and they inevitably leave. But the reason why they exist, the reason why such a concept even exists internally within the United States of America is because there are areas where you can get away with paying people less. Free trade is basically that on steroids. Low-cost zones also mean that a lot of the background employees that you hire are that you can pay even less. That doesn't end up improving the situation in these states anyway.
This week, 650 taconite miners are laid off. Those taconite miners are mining the taconite to make the steel to build the automobiles. So I don't disagree where they're at, and I think this is the Democratic dilemma. Donald Trump talks about the things that are real in the angst of people's lives. He doesn't do a damn thing about it. In fact, he does just the opposite, and he pals around with the people that caused the problem. And we don't offer them a solution, so it looks like we're not hearing them. So I disagree with Sean Fain and UAW on this issue. I don't disagree with them on that we made decisions over the last 30 to 40 years that I don't think helped America, but this is not the solution to it. Isolating ourselves is not the solution. We need to make sure that we're focusing. And again, I would just end with this, Jake. Donald Trump has not once ever cared about workers. This is why you need to support unions across the board, support the ability to have a living wage.
So we heard your former running mate Kamala Harris say she's not here to say I told you so, although obviously that's what she was saying about all the Trump chaos. We're saying, I have to say though, what does I told you so really mean here? I mean, people heard her message. They did not vote for her. She lost every battleground state. You yourself have criticized the Harris-Walz campaign for being too cautious. She may have told the American people, she may have warned the American people, but she didn't do it compellingly enough to win.
That is the absolute point. And look what
Oh my, wow. I can't believe I'm hearing this from a liberal mainstream institution. I can't believe I'm hearing this for the first time ever, now that it's not Hillary Clinton, a post-election analysis that's coming 4 or 5 months after the election, 6 months after the election, a post-election analysis that actually pits the blame successfully on the party that lost. Wow. If only there was someone who was saying that before the election, during the election, after the election, and hasn't stopped saying that. And yet people yell at me all the time for it because of the lack of interest from mainstream institutions that actually brain warp all the liberals into believing that our public servants are not there to serve us. We are there to serve them. They do not fail us. We failed them by not voting hard enough, regardless of how bad their messaging is, regardless of how bad their policies are.
When I criticize, I'm criticizing myself. I own this. I'm part of.
Can you elaborate on that more? I don't understand. I don't think I know what free trade is. You just kind of said a bunch of outcomes. Free trade agreements with other countries is lowering restrictions on how countries can trade with one another in an effort to allow capital owners to move manufacturing to other countries where labor costs are significantly lower. They're so low, as a matter of fact, that it is literally cheaper for companies, American companies, to move their manufacturing there and then ship the supplies back to the United States of America and many other markets. Yes, it allows free flow of investment and capital to lower cost areas. And the argument there is that it's a mutually beneficial scenario. The argument is a lie, of course. It's beneficial because these countries that are poorer overall will be able to take the foreign capital that's coming in and greatly improve their living conditions. And yet, after multiple decades of free trade agreements with many of these nations, a lot of these countries have not been able to improve their material conditions because that's not the goal. The goal is not to magnanimously improve the conditions in living conditions of like the global south. As a matter of fact, it's to keep it poor to the best of your ability so that you can consistently extract higher profit margins.
The ticket, and somebody has to come up with a strategy. I think this is exactly right. This is the thing. Look, Democrats, it was a good night in Wisconsin. I was over there. We saw that happen. Donald Trump's doing this. Just to be clear, nobody on the Democratic side is celebrating this, and those folks in the street are not celebrating that Donald Trump's making all these errors. I think what the vice president's saying is that was pretty self-evident.
Also, the other side of this problem isn't necessarily the lack of manufacturing jobs. The other side of this problem is the reason why manufacturing jobs were desperately moved overseas, because those jobs historically had better union participation and therefore more power to bargain for their salaries and demand better benefits. This made it an incredibly costly endeavor for capital owners. Once those jobs moved overseas and labor union participation plummeted and labor power plummeted. There's also environmental regulations as well. You're right. There's a lot of stuff. Same with low-cost zones, even internally in the United States of America. But once that goes away, there's no more bargaining power overall, and wages consistently keep depressing. Pair that up with a steady flow of undocumented migrants that you keep undocumented in an effort to hyper-exploit people here domestically, and you arrive at the incredibly depressed wages of the American working class. No labor power, no power to push back against even either party in the duopoly, and here we are.
That he was going to do that. I do think the challenge for Democrats, and this is, I think, a structural problem that's going to take a lot more thinking. Why, with all of that out there, did they not think we were any better than that? And they didn't. And I'm very concerned with the folks who stayed home. And these are folks that I'll say once again, Donald Trump has identified their angst. They can't buy a house. They can't afford to get a good education. They're concerned that their economic future is so precarious it could slip out from under them. Less than half of Americans have $1,000 in savings. And I think, why was...
The reality is that the U.S. won't have the same manufacturing as the past. There needs to be an investment in education, including free university infrastructure investment. Yes. That's the other thing. Here's the problem. We already have jobs. The problem is not that we don't have jobs. The problem is we don't have good pay. This is what a lot of people don't understand. They're fucking dense. They think like manufacturing jobs coming back to the United States of America means like 1965 levels of economic freedom, a single earning two-parent household with a wife that can stay at home, with children that go to college, and go to public get the best possible public education with like a 12-person classroom. That's what they think is going to happen, and they're stupid. That's not what's going to happen. We already have jobs, because that's the argument, right? Oh, manufacturing comes back to the United States. All of a sudden, we have more opportunities to work in the factories. Like, bitch, your fat ass is not going to work in the factory. Get out of here. We already have similar assembly line conditions anyway, and those jobs don't pay at all. Like Amazon distribution facilities. You don't want to sew t-shirts, or rather you would do that because you think that it's going to actually pay you more. Problem is it doesn't, because the existing jobs right now don't pay you enough. What makes you think that like manufacturing is going to actually pay you more? To me, sure, it's great. It's great to combat against offshoring. Fine. I like that. That's great. Bring manufacturing back into this country, and instead of making weapons, build shit that matters, that will improve people's lives. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't end with like manufacturing jobs coming back to the country. It has to be good paying union jobs with good benefits, where there's better distribution of profits back to the labor force. That is the real issue. That is the real problem. That's precisely the reason why when these guys like Lutnick goes on television and says like, oh, we're going to bring these factories back to America. He literally says, and we're going to keep costs low because it's going to be automation. Okay. So the average American isn't going to get a job there. We're just fantasizing about factories and a technology that doesn't even exist in America yet, magically coming here, materializing out of thin air, and it's not even going to be beneficial for the American labor force.
Was it not so compelling? It
So
should have been a
stupid.
slam dunk for us to say, we're the party that cares about that. We're the party that's going to protect Social Security and Medicare. We're the party that thinks the ACA is a good start, but we need to do more on health care. And we didn't do that. So I'm concerned. Democrats do well in special elections and off-year elections, but the electorate that comes in presidential election years is different. When I was young, it was easy to know what a Democrat was. They stood with the working class and labor. Republicans were country club and for the rich.
I love how the answer from Libs is infrastructure investment, which employs temporary construction workers in effect, unless they're in the building trades, but not manufacturing, which creates more organized labor infrastructure historically. Yeah, that's the one benefit. But I think H. Bizzle, you would agree with me when I say this. The real goal of bringing back manufacturing in the United States of America, some people will say, is a matter of national security. I don't necessarily care about that. But the real goal is because people fantasize about 1965 levels of living standards. Not for black people. I mean, like, just in general, everyone that's living on U.S. soil will have 1965 living standards. You get a fucking good paying job, 9 to 5, clock in, clock out, get to pay for both of your children, maybe your third child, for their education. Healthcare is no longer an issue. Infrastructure seemingly works. It's just like, that's the fantasy. And they think the only way that you can fucking do that is through manufacturing jobs. I'm saying I don't have an issue with that, because manufacturing, as H. Bizzle also correctly pointed out, is one of the best possible ways of maintaining permanent, long-standing jobs. One of the most resilient parts of the labor force, because there's always need for microwaves and shit. But the real reason why people want that is because of all the benefits that I'm mentioning. And you can't get those benefits without labor unions. You can't. Like if their goal is to bring back like sock factories and t-shirt factories and garment manufacturing to the United States of America, great. Except if they're not unionized, then those guys are not getting shit out of this. And if their goal is to inevitably automate all of that process through artificial intelligence and automation and robots and whatnot, then no worker ends up seeing the benefits of that anyway.
Today, you ask people, they don't. We have a 29% approval rating.
Yeah.
It doesn't help us any that Donald Trump ends up with a 25% approval rating. We have to get back to the core issues, that this is about making America prosperous and stable and innovative for everybody.
Well, what do you make of the criticism that one of the reasons why your party was so resoundingly rejected last November is because Democrats were gaslighting the country, saying that inflation was not a big deal, heralding Bidenomics. Not only Biden, but Kamala Harris was heralding Bidenomics, pretending that there wasn't a problem at the border. And then fundamentally, this idea that President Biden was up for another 4 years of the job, while Americans in poll after poll for year after year were saying he's too old to do the job.
Yeah. Who else wasn't calling that into question, though? Oh, that's right. You, bro. You and your lackeys. Your
party stood against all of those things.
Look, Joe Biden coming in and doing COVID and being a governor through COVID did a hell of a job. But I think one of the things that we didn't do is we assumed that we said, and it was true, that we were going to have a soft landing and our economy was better than the rest of the world. Better for who? Better for the working class who was saying groceries were too expensive, as they are now and going up. They got to see us talk about things. Again, I go back to this. Don't talk about food insecurity or housing type of issues. Talk about people being hungry and wondering where they're going to live, or about their children's future, about real security. And so I think your question is spot on. I think we got intellectualized on this. I think the fact of the matter is Joe Biden did soft land the economy. He did usher us through COVID. None of us are saying we should be soft on the border, but we allow a vacuum, and Donald Trump fills it, the 800-pound gorilla, and their narrative starts to stick, and we look weak. We look weak, like we don't care. We look like look, Jake, I'm not going to say, you know, what we need to do is we need to just arrest people and ship them to El Salvador. No, we need to invest the money on border. We need to make sure that we have the judges necessary to adjudicate things faster. We need to make sure if you're going to be in this country here legally, and when you are, you're going to be uplifted, celebrated, and part of this great American tapestry. We didn't do that, and then it fills them. They'll find the example that is horrific, where you have someone who's not here legally and they commit a crime. That is horrific, but we don't do a good job of telling that.
Don't you think your party needs to acknowledge that President Biden was not up for the job of running for re-election, and that this was a major mistake by the
He made that decision.
I know, but you all went along with the idea that he was up for it, and he wasn't. And everybody saw it, and the country rejected it.
Yeah, well, look, history will tell us to go back.
What? The problem is there was no underlying counter messaging infrastructure from the Democratic Party, no initiative and no interest in combating the misinformation, and no interest in actually changing policy when they had the power to do so. Look at what Donald Trump is doing with the executive office right now. Okay, he's running his dick through everything. Now imagine if Joe Brandon, or any, let's not say Joe Brandon, but any Democratic leadership that had the same momentum that Donald Trump had or has right now, the initiative that Donald Trump is demonstrating right now to solve some of these fucking problems in the direction that they claimed they would, by saying, guess what? This is what democracy is. The people voted for me to do this. Donald Trump goes, guess what? This is democracy. The people voted for me to do this. I have the heavens mandate. I've been touched by God because of the victory that I secured over Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Look at what he's done in just 3 months. Now imagine if Democrats did do that, if they weren't so fearful to break things every now and then, but in the direction of a greater good. Just be stubborn and consistent and demonstrate your moral compass over and over again. Imagine if they did that. We were having a conversation about Brandon not being able to forgive student loan debt. Donald Trump quite literally has, 1, violated court orders, and 2, continues to violate court orders, erode due process, and he signed an executive, he signed through executive authority the right to abolish the Department of Education. What are we talking about? He has de facto abolished the Department of Education. It's ridiculous. Yeah, he has also dissolved labor unions at the federal level. He did that in 3 months. Yeah, he signed an executive order to amend the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. Now, some of those things he's not going to be able to get across, but it's clear that when someone has the initiative, when someone is stubborn enough, apparently, when they win the presidency, they have a tremendous amount of power.
Back on that. That very well could be the case, Jake. What I'm concerned about is learning from those lessons. I would hope we would never do it again, make a mistake, make sure we go through and get someone. But I don't know where it helps us going forward. I certainly am deeply concerned that Donald Trump is going to lead us down a horrific look. Thank God it's tariffs that he said. Donald Trump listens to no one. Remember, Donald Trump has statements about, I don't think nuclear war would be that bad. I guess we're lucky that he went after tariffs instead of that route. Yeah. We have an issue in this country that is going to impact us. And if there is not a loyal opposition, if there's not some soul searching on our side, if there's not reaching out to those folks who are in the streets, they're leading right now.
So quick question.
I would tell everybody, you better get with them. Yeah.
Quick question, because we got to go. But you said you're not going to run for the Senate seat there. Are you going to run for a third term for governor? Are you possibly going to run for president in 2028?
Well, I'm certainly thinking about running again in Minnesota if that's what they want. I am not thinking about running in 2028. And my advice to folks is if in this moment you're planning for 2028, you're going to get rolled by the people in the streets. You just need to be out there making sure you're helping and doing things like Cory Booker's doing things like Bernie Sanders, AOC, things that we see people out.
Why are you bringing Cory Booker up, bro? Yeah. Democrats should be doing what Cory Booker's doing, which is yapping for 24 hours and then using using the power of the pen to give more weapons to Israel so they can do better genocide. Boo. Also, fake Fapper has no leg to stand on here. The whole MSM waited too long to go after Biden's age.
Get better. So there is an opportunity every time he goes out, every time Joe Biden goes out.
Oof. Age is like a broken bone. It doesn't, age is not like a broken bone. It doesn't get better. Oof. Damn, I'm kind of mad. That's a banger line. I'm mad I didn't think of it first. Like, I mean, I've been making this same exact joke for a while, but that's like a way more poetic way to put it, you know? When they want to be, the media can actually do their job, and it's annoying.
It's so disconcerting that I've seen it happen in like a week. You know, like overnight. I'm just like, what the f you doing? What have you been doing this entire time?
It's very, very frustrating that they didn't do this before, and only now are they attempting to do it. And it's like, where was this energy in 2020, man? Yep, far too late.